All right, so we got a different one in. It's a 395 cubic inch Windsor. It was a 351, and then it was bored and stroked to make it 395 cubic inches. A buddy of mine brought it to me. He's going with a turbo setup. This was an NA motor. He's wanting to go, put a turbo on it like pretty much everybody does nowadays, and want to make a little bit more power. So he had Bullet Racing spec him a custom cam. Mark over at Bullet's an awesome guy. All those guys, they're one of the best in the business. A lot of people use them to spec their custom cams, and really what you're doing is paying a fee on top of Bullet. So give Bullet a call and they'll take good care of you. They've also recommended pack springs with this one, and these things are, it looks like about 250 at 2-inch and 765 at 1.2. So they're a pretty serious spring. This is it has a hydraulic roller in it now. They're running solid rollers on it, so it's a tight lash solid roller cam. Other than, those will actually work well. A lot of the cam guys say it doesn't have a lash ramp, but it works just fine. So that's something interesting. This thing has the older protopline heads. They were reworked by Fox Lake. Fox Lake was one of the best in the business in our area. Ron up there, he really knew his stuff, especially on these Windsors. He had programs for it. They did CNC work. It was just an awesome company. I don't have any bad things to say about them, but they did really good work. We're still working on this. I haven't quite got the video done because the customer hasn't decided exactly what he wants to do with it, but we're not done with it yet. We'll get there. So let's start the tear down on this. This motor has been ran. We're gonna look it over, make sure everything looks okay. He had some problems leaning out here and there. He sorted them out, but we wanna make sure everything's in good shape before he decides to boost it. And we're gonna put the cam in, we're gonna put the valve springs in, we're gonna set the valve train up, we're gonna check for push rod length, and then we're gonna degree the cam, everything like that, to make sure everything's where it needs to be. So I'm gonna time lapse it. You guys don't need a step-by-step of how to tear apart an intake, valve covers, heads, timing cover, but I'll time lapse it so you guys can watch what's going on. All right, so we got it all apart. A couple of small things. It's going to be hard for you guys to see, but there's some scuffing in this cylinder. I know he said he had ran lean. I saw a couple water spots. I know he was running it on E85, so I'm not surprised by the water spots. Interesting thing, these are Iski lifters, and they're solid roller. The cups aren't retained or anything, so when you were actually pulling the push rods out, the cups came out. I like to keep the lifters in order, so they go in the same spot they're in. I know it's swapping cams, it's not a big deal, but it's just a personal preference. A couple other things I noticed. Some of these had gotten tight, so they just need adjusted a little bit better. They were a little bit too tight, almost like just and sometimes when you're adjusting with these girdles, you have to play with them just a little bit, because all these studs may not be in alignment. So when you actually go to tighten them down and it pulls it into alignment, it can close up the clearance a little bit. So sometimes they're a little finicky. It wasn't anything bad. The heads themselves look okay. I don't see any damage. I did notice that there's a couple dowel pins stacked in a couple of the holes, and the dowel pins are still there, so it really isn't necessary to do that. All you have to do is push them down in the block, and they sit in the recess. They're just a locating dowel. The pistons themselves look good. It sits about 5 thou down, so there is a little bit room for more compression, but since he's going boosted, it won't really matter anyway. Other than that, I don't see anything terribly bad, but I am going to call him about these scuffs, see if he wants to go a little further with it, tearing it down. You know, if he wants to look and see, did the ring gap close up? Did he start scuffing it? Because something in there got hotter than it liked. But it'll be up to him on what he wants to do. I coated it down. This stuff in there is just a WD-40. I don't want it to pick up any surface corrosion, because that E85 likes to dry out the top of the cylinders and they will corrode very quickly. So I coated it up for now, just till we make a decision. I'm probably going to cut this oil filter apart too, make sure there's no major debris in there. I looked at the cam gear because that's a point of wear on these small block Fords. You know, sometimes when they get ran hard or high volume pumps, they wear a little bit, but this thing hadn't been together long, and it's got the right gear material on it. So there's nothing major there. Other than that, nothing too surprising. Just a few small things that we'll have to address and go through and make sure it's good to go. Because when he puts boost to it, you know, any kind of weakness he'll find. And he doesn't want to have any issues, and since he's planning to race it, I don't want to see him with any issues. So we'll go from there. Thanks, guys. I'll bring you back once we figure out what we're going to do with this. All right, so we got the heads pulled apart. They want, or rather Bullet wants, to spec a 1.950 to 960 installed height. What I'm coming up with, what he's got here is 1.855 to 1.860 when I check the height. So we either got to get longer valves or different locks and retainers to change the heights to give us more space, because there's actually no shims underneath. The other thing I noticed is this has AFR guide plates in it, and it's going to be a little hard for you guys to see, but they're cracked. One actually was completely cracked when I tore it apart. So that's not good. And it looks like somebody had tried to weld them. And when I talked to the owner, he said, yeah, he did, but every time the weld cooled, they popped. So they must be made out of some kind of pot metal. This is not good. Also, the other thing I noticed is it's got the smaller 3/8 rocker studs. So that's why he had those girdles and everything on there. The heads are actually threaded for the larger size, but they use these. So I don't particularly like that, because you're only as strong as what this is. And even though they're good material, it looks like they're fine, but they always break right where the threads start, typically. But I'm gonna have to talk to the owner, see what he wants to do on this one. So it's always something. Everything simple turns into a bigger ordeal, and the only thing you can do is roll with it, improvise, adapt, and overcome. So that's what we're gonna do. There's a few solutions, and we'll figure out which one he wants to get. Probably, you know, whatever's the cheapest or most cost effective. He may want to go to a lighter retainer anyway, so we can always do that. All right, so the owner and I got to talking, and he already had enough money put in those older, you know, protopline heads, whatever they were. And, you know, by the time we machined them or played around with them, they get enough installed height for the new pack springs to work. It just, he didn't feel it was worth it anymore. So he stepped way up and bought these CNC AFR Renegade 225 heads. And what he did was I told him order them pre-set up for the solid rollers because it gives you the installed height we need. It's right now is between 1930 and 1940. Honestly, they could have been a lot more consistent out of the box, but they're not. It's I guess that's what you get with out of the box heads. But I checked the valve job and everything like that. It looks pretty good. It's not, you know, could you make it better? Absolutely. But out of the box, it's not bad. The ports on this thing, yeah, they look great. I have no issues with these. You know, they're gonna make good power. They're gonna do everything he wants them to do. We still gotta set them up for the other heads or the other springs, install them. But man, these things are gonna make power. And now at this point, we're gonna have to worry about the life of this stock block because this thing should be like 12:2-to-1 compression. He's gonna be running E85 with the turbo. So this thing has a cast crank in it. You know, him and I have been over it. He knows that everything in here is he's definitely pushing his limits, but it should definitely be, it'll make power. I mean, this thing is just, he's gonna have to stop it from making power. So I'm pretty excited to see actually how it does. I've cleaned the decks up real good. We're gonna go with an MLS gasket. He doesn't want to tear it down, so I did my best with the decks to clean them. I've done this before. We never had an issue with MLS sealing up, but you know, ideally you should have, they want like 50 RA or better for Cometic gaskets. But these decks, as long as they're flat and true and reasonably in good shape, which these ones are, you won't have an issue. So I'm gonna get to assembling these heads. And with the new springs, man, they got some seat pressure. They got some open pressure. He's not gonna have any valve train issues. So I'll time lapse reinstalling these springs and everything like that. I've already gone through and checked the assembled height, so we'll get them together and then we can install the cam in that engine, degree it, check for piston to valve clearance, and then we can bolt down the heads. All right, guys, excuse the rain. Uninsulated metal garage, so, you know, it's a thing. I got these together. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but man, some of them just wanted to fight. They are definitely got some pressure behind them now. So they're all assembled. We can't wait to get these things bolted to that thing and make some power. I'll bring you guys back when I start doing that. Still got to work on this wonderful beast. All right, back onto this Windsor stroker. These are the AFR 220 heads. I misspoken. One said they were the 225. They're not. They're the 220 heads. They're CNC ported. Really, really nice cylinder heads. Almost too much head for this engine, but you know, you can guarantee he'll make the power he wants. And they look a lot better than what he had. So usually you have to seal these rocker studs. It looks like one side goes to the intake, one side doesn't. So something to watch out for. The ports actually, this he told me is a Chinese copy of a Victor Jr. intake, and it has had some slight work done. But actually looking down the ports, it lines up pretty well. I was mocking it up. He had the custom cam done by Bullet, and they use a a bigger, cam bolt. So we torqued that to 75 foot-pound. We found a washer. It's actually, I looked it up and found one that'll work. This is actually for like a small block Chevy crankshaft, but I like that it's a nice thick washer. It gives it plenty of space. The only thing to watch out for is to make sure that this doesn't contact your timing cover. I haven't checked that yet. I actually degreed it in. They wanted 110. I came up at 109.5. With the adjustments we have available on this keyway, other than maybe filing the keyway or something to get that half degree, you're not gonna get it. So what I did was, 109.5 is fine. And this is a reasonably tight chain. And it's got a thrust bearing set up, everything like that. So we're gonna go with MLS gaskets on it. I know a lot of people say not to use them on a old deck that hasn't been cleaned, but we stone the deck. It's good to go. Ideally this thing, he's good with 800 horse at the wheels. I think it's going to make that with ease. The only thing going to hold him back is his turbo, and I think he's going E85 blow through carb. I'm trying to talk him into EFI, but it's not my choice on that matter. So it should be a fun little project. I'll bring you guys back when he's waiting on he wants to go with a shaft rocker system. And right now they're, everywhere he's finding, they either don't have them in stock or they're 4 to 6 weeks out or something crazy. So he's trying to find something. He's trying to decide between like T&D, Jezel, Scorpion actually makes a set of shaft rockers. But I've never used them. I've used the regular stud-mounted rockers, and they've always been pretty decent. But we're looking into a few different options for this thing. So once we get there, it'll be fun to get it going, and maybe I'll go to the track with him and see how it does. He's not a huge fan of the dyno. I tried to talk him into it, but he's just not a huge fan of it.